Don't ask why a silver ring hanging from a rusty nail could make an entire town change its path. I had only stopped for a drink, but when the tied-up girl looked at it the way someone looks at a sentence passed down, I knew. Leaving meant owing the night a debt. Staying meant standing between guns and the truth. What do you choose when the sound clink comes again? Wind from the empty lot swept across the main street and snagged on the green-painted sign, "Blacksmith, Riley." The sign creaked. Beneath it, the silver ring hung from the rusty nail. The thin band, chipped the size of a fingernail, glinted and went dull as clouds passed. With each gust, it trembled. The sound was small, like a mosquito, but anyone walking by could hear it. They changed course. They took the long way around, as if avoiding a snake lying still. The blacksmith's door stood ajar. The smell of coke clung to passers-by like kitchen smoke on cloth. The hammer on the anvil had just stopped, and then stayed silent. On the wooden step, dried mud prints from boot soles overlapped. One was fresher, the edges still damp, laid over the older ones, pointing toward the wall where the nail was driven. That patch of mud was speckled with gray, like silver dust. The yellow dog under the water trough lifted its head, ears twitching each time the ring touched the nail. It didn't bark. Its eyes followed people avoiding the ring as if it were filth. 3 children carrying flour sacks hugged the wall. The smallest slipped. The sack thudded to the ground. The shopkeeper yanked the child back, whispered something, eyes flicking toward the nail before turning away. No one spoke aloud. Eli Ward reined in at the edge of the porch. His horse breathed light mist. Dust clung thick to his boots. His gaze went first to the silver ring, then the nail, then across to the row of saloon windows opposite. The glass still showed streaks from a recent wipe. In the blurred mirror of the pane, he saw his own back and the horse, saw the ring shaking as if hanging in midair without need of a wall. He froze. His grip on the reins tightened for a beat. On the lamppost in front of the saloon, the girl stood, hands pulled behind her. Twisted hemp bit into her wrists, purple grooves sunk but silent. On the table nearest the window lay a pipe, crosswise, its mouth aimed at the door like a dark eye. The air was sharp with liquor, ripe sweat, and damp leather. A 3-legged chair leaned against the wall, its break exposing white wood grain. Eli took a step. The silver ring shivered again, struck the nail, crisp, dry, like a hoof on broken glass. The horse flicked its ears, tail brushing his calf. He stopped, looked around. Those who had been rushing slowed abruptly. The street narrowed with people pulled away from an invisible line between the ring and the lamppost. The girl's eyes flicked from the ring to Eli. A short glance, then back to the ring. Her chest rose and fell without steady rhythm. At her throat, a chain of small scratches, as if someone had drawn coarse thread across the skin. From time to time, the hemp cord rasped low, a sound more felt than heard. Wind gathered dust into her hem, laying a thin coat over the worn edge of an old patch. Eli set his hand on the lip of the water trough. The water lay still, flat as glass. He tilted his head, watching the ring's reflection flip with each gust. From the blacksmith's doorway, the shadow of a large man blocked a light, then withdrew. No hammer blows, no hiss from the bellows. The whole street held its breath. The shopkeeper at the general store counter stepped back suddenly when Eli moved half a pace closer. Her heel scraped the door's threshold, squealing. She turned away, adjusting the flour sack, but the motion was needless. The sack hadn't shifted. Her eyes cut to the nail in the wall, then dropped, like someone caught before they'd had the chance to lie. Sheriff Vaughn came out from the next shop. The door swung. The little bell above it gave a single click. In his hand, an unlit pipe. Its stem tapped his thumbnail twice, even in rhythm. At his hip, a high-slung holster, mouth open, leather polished from habit. His face flat, one corner of his mouth pulled, not a smile. He stopped under the awning. His shadow covered part of the trough, dulling the water's surface. He didn't look at Eli right away. His eyes circled the ring, the chip, the nail, then down to the bound wrists. Stopped where rope met welding flame. Not jewelry, not something hung for show. A young man in a leather apron, likely the blacksmith's helper, peeked out. His gaze skimmed Eli, then locked on the silver ring. His lips pressed. His hand touched the doorframe, realized the slip, then drew back like from a hot forge. He vanished inside. The cloth curtain swayed, lofting dust that sparked as if real silver. Eli stepped closer. The gap between him and the nail closed to an arm's reach. The damp hemp smell rose from the girl's wrists, sour, with a faint metallic trace. Her knees drew in. Her legs lacked the straightness of someone who'd stood too long. A green fly landed on the ring, walked its circle, touched the chip, then flew away. The sheriff lifted the pipe to his eye level, didn't light it, tapped it twice more against his nail, same rhythm as before. 3 sets of 2. The sound barely there, but Eli heard it. The girl heard it too. Her eyes tightened a fraction. Her lips parted, showing a fine crack of dryness. Her tongue touched the corner of her mouth, stopped halfway as if to avoid pain. Still she watched the ring. She looked at no one. A wagon hauling butter tubs rolled by, wheels humming over a pothole before stopping. The driver glanced once, saw the sheriff, dropped his head, and steered the horse down the back lane. Wheel sounds faded. On a roof, the wind-bent tin sheet scraped against its neighbor, screeching like rope fibers when pulled too hard. Eli brought his hand to his belt, thumb touching the edge of the old dagger sheath. Just touched. Didn't draw. He measured the distance with his eyes. From his hand to the ring, from the ring to the rope, from the rope to the sheriff's gun. Imaginary lines crossing in the middle of the street like a thin net. Touch it, and the net would tremble like the ring was trembling now. An old woman came out of the saloon carrying a tray of water. Halfway through the door she stopped. The tray tipped. The water hit the metal rim with a sharp clang. She looked at the ring, looked at the girl, then turned back inside, shutting the door. From within came the sound of a glass set hastily from inside the shop. The ring had been handled by someone just before being hung. Someone had meant for it to be there, not something dropped. Only now did the sheriff look straight at Eli, eyes pale, like ash. They didn't speak. The pipe in the sheriff's hand moved from right to left. His knuckles gave a small crack. He set the pipe on the edge of the porch, its stem pointing toward the ring like a fletchless arrow. His gaze left open, neither threat nor invitation. The only road led toward the nail. The girl drew a deep breath. Her chest rose, the rope tightened. A small sound slipped out, not words, just sound. Her lips trembled. Her eyes could not bear the silver edge another beat. They tightened, then strained toward Eli in a plea, then darted back to the ring, as if afraid someone might see her look away. The crack at the corner of her mouth bled a thin line. She swallowed. No water. A child ran past, kicking an empty tin. It rolled, struck the wall just under the nail, bounced, and came to rest on its side. Its mouth aimed toward the lamppost. The hollow rattle made someone inside the saloon startle, drop a spoon. The spoon hit the floor, the thin metal ringing long and sharp. The ring answered with the faintest tremor, like a silent nod. Eli set his hand on the wall beneath the nail. His fingertips touched peeling paint, the feel rough, cold. He smelled damp metal, rust, forge dust. At the nail's edge, a thin black thread was caught in the rust, like a hair, but stiffer. He pulled gently. It didn't break. It ran into the nail hole. A snare? A sign? He wasn't sure. Sweat beaded under his hat, ran down his temple, cold. The sheriff bent to pick up the pipe, tapped it lightly on the porch edge, even beats. 2, 2, 2. The same rhythm as when he'd appeared. No words, but the rhythm carried the weight of an order. A few in the crowd turned their backs, pretending to search their pockets. A man slipped into the side alley. The small door there shut softly. Everyone had their share in this silence. Eli looked up. His eyes met the sheriff's. Thought to the water jug on the lamppost. The lid ajar. The water scentless. He started to lift it. His wrist stopped halfway. The girl tilted her head, barely. Her eyes stayed on the ring. A door at the far end of the street opened. Dust, light, and the clop of clogs spilled together. A shadow slipped by and vanished behind the stack of barrels. No one called out. The sheriff didn't turn. He kept tapping the pipe, the rhythm unbroken. Eli followed where the shadow had gone. Couldn't see. On the ground where it passed was a fresh black streak, hand's length, as if something heavy had been dragged. The girl drew a second breath. Longer. No sound. Her shoulders shook. The hemp at her left wrist bit another half-turn deeper, revealing a white line beneath, cleaner than the skin around it. Under the dust, that white line looked like a letter someone had scrubbed away. Eli understood. Here, everything had letters, even skin, and whoever wrote them didn't want them read. Outside the blacksmith's, the ring trembled again. This time, not from wind. No wind at all. It shook on its own. The tap against the nail was small but hard. A mother pulled her child away. The child glanced back, flower still on its hand, leaving a faint white print on the doorframe. The print curved in a half-moon. It yellowed in the sun, then fell apart, grain by grain. Eli drew his hand back from the jug. His knuckles opened and closed. He turned, placing himself square between the ring and the girl, a thin barrier. No one told him to. He didn't think. He just did it. The air shifted, like someone moving a chair. The sheriff stopped tapping the pipe. Silence stretched. He lifted the pipe to his teeth, touched it there, then pulled it away. His eyes moved to Eli. Stopped. No shrug. No smile. His mouth formed a word without sound. It could have been a name. Could have been go. Could have been don't. No one knew. But at that moment, the yellow dog under the trough whined softly, ears up. It stared at the narrow alley beside the blacksmith's. Seed rain. Not touching each other. 3 sets of eyes met. Eli's, the girl's, the sheriff's. The street wind seemed to stop. A dry leaf drifted at eye level, came to rest on the windowsill edge, stayed. Time folded into a thin corner where you could hear a heartbeat. Eli hadn't touched the ring yet, but his hand was there, one knuckle away, one breath away, and someone, somewhere behind closed doors, had begun to count. Not aloud, but the beat was clear. 2, 2, 2. The tap of Sheriff Vaughn's pipe against his thumbnail came twice, dry, even. He stood under the awning, his shadow cutting across the lip of the water trough. Evidence, don't touch it. He looked at Eli only briefly, then his gaze moved to the silver ring on the rusty nail, stopping at the chip. No one added a word. Eli lowered his hat, sweat pulling back into his sideburns. He asked quietly, voice no higher than the wind, "What law did she break?" Vaughn's mouth lifted on one side. The shaved skin there shone faintly with sweat. "Not your business." The pipe shifted to his left hand. His right fell near the gun grip, not touching, just close enough for skin to brush skin. The smell of damp leather and gun oil was as thin as breath. The girl stood still. The hemp rope at her wrists rasped her skin with each dry swallow. A faint buzzing, like an insect trapped in cloth. Her eyes never left the ring. At the rim of one pupil, a tiny red thread where a vessel had burst. The water jug leaning against the lamppost tilted a degree, mouth still wet. The lip mark on its rim had dried into a white line. The yellow dog under the trough pricked its ears, eyes blinking with each tap of the pipe. 2, 2, 2, 2. It gave a low growl, then lay down again, head on its paws. Across the street, an old man touched his hat brim, stepped back into shadow. Under the saloon awning, the pawnbroker sat behind a low table, his waistcoat pulled tight over his belly, its tarnished silver buttons like sun-bleached fish bones. He opened the leather pouch at his thigh, drawing the frayed tassel of its rope closure. Inside, on a bed of dirt, the creases and set to powder. Inside the saloon, a glass slid along the counter, touched a coin and stopped. The coin spun half a turn, then lay still. No one picked it up. In the back room, a guitar string being tuned went slack, the sound falling away. The saloon keeper turned her face sideways, eyes fixed not outside but on a spot on the wall, a black speck the size of a fingernail. Eli stepped to the water jug. He lifted it, tilted until the water touched the lip, letting the first drop spill out to wash away the dust. His arm moved slowly, as if testing the weight of air. The girl angled her head to meet it. Her eyes never left the ring. Only when the water neared her mouth did she whisper, the sound caught in her throat. "Don't touch that ring." The sentence lacked a subject, no name. The wind cut it shorter still. Eli stood still, holding the jug halfway. The water trembled inside the wood, its surface breaking into small circles that tapped the sides and dissolved. He glanced at the ring. The chip glinted, then went dark, like someone blinking. Across the street, near the row of salt barrels, a stranger leaned on a post, hat brim low, a piece broken away. His right hand gripped a long leather case, the bulge in its middle enough for anyone who knew guns to guess the barrel. The case's strap scraped against a metal ring with a thin tack. His boots were crossed at the ankles. The left heel scuffed sand into a half moon. He didn't move again. Eli lowered the jug. The girl licked the corner of her dry mouth. The water was right there in his hand, but her throat wouldn't take it. Her hand tightened, nails pressing into her palm. No moan, just a short inhale. A sweat-darkened strand of hair shifted once, then stilled. Vaughn glanced at the stranger, briefly, then back to the pawnbroker. No call. The pawnbroker came on his own, still holding the lock. He set it on the wooden table in front of him, tapped his nail on the lock's body. Tock, tock, tock. The same beat. The table's surface bore parallel gouges, as if from a dull knife drawn many times. In the grooves clung Black Runner's chest, was a small X in fresh chalk, the dust still soft. The girl jerked her chin toward the ring on the nail. Eli followed her glance. On the inner rim of the silver at the chipped edge were two old knife marks, one long, one short, cut by a dull blade. Together they matched the mark on the lock but reversed. Eli remembered the silver dust on his saddle earlier. Not silver, forge dust. The ring had been worked in this forge. By whom? No one said. Vaughn lifted the pipe to his lips, still unlit, held only by habit. His mouth shaped a soundless word. Eli couldn't read it. At the same time, the stranger across the street shifted his stance. A small motion. The leather case heavy. The strap hissed briefly. He looked at the pawnbroker, then the ring, then Eli's right hand. Eli extended his hand. Didn't touch the ring. Stopped one knuckle short. Anyone close would see the pulse in his wrist jump once, then slow. The girl exhaled. A thread of sound slipped from her throat, broke midway, fell away. Not a word. The pawnbroker picked up the lock between two fingers, holding it to his eye as if checking the cuts. He tilted his head, letting sunlight slice across its edge, the steel's flash forcing a blink. His voice slid thin over the surface. "Want her back? Bring the collar." The words dropped on the street like lead. No one caught them. A child dropped a tin. It rolled against the pawnbroker's table, bounced, lay still. The girl blinked once, longer than normal. Her chest held its rhythm, then missed a beat. Her bound hands clenched, the rope biting deeper. Blood rose in the groove. Eli didn't turn his head, but he caught the faces around them in the corner of his eye. Some gave the barest nod, some looked away, some stared at their own boots as if seeing mud for the first time. Someone coughed, then stopped, as if afraid to crack the street's surface. On the saloon porch, the keeper wiped the rim of a glass, rubbing one clean spot again and again. "Bring the collar," the pawnbroker repeated, his forefinger tapping the old rhythm on the table. Talk, talk, talk. With each tap, his eyes touched the chip in the ring, then base of the post. This time she didn't whisper, but her voice was still low. "Don't." One word. Enough. No explanation, no plea. Just an invisible mark of prohibition drawn across the space between his hand and the ring. Vaughn pulled the pipe from his mouth, slipped it into his breast pocket, stem left showing just a short length. He stood straight. His shadow stretched, touching the lip of the water jug, covering the white lip mark on its rim. His hand fell closer to the gun grip. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened. Not anger, not joy, just the weariness of a man used to a certain kind of thing, wanting it to happen in the order he knew. The stranger across the street tilted his head enough to lift the brim of his hat. A thin scar ran from cheekbone to ear. He shifted the long leather case to his right shoulder. The metal hook on its strap kissed the loop and sparked a thin flash. He held his breath for a beat, then breathed again. From his pocket, his left hand drew a crumpled scrap of cloth, unfolded it, then folded it back. On its edge, 3 pinhead dots. He tucked it away. The pawnbroker lowered the lock, put it back in the pouch. He tied the rope cord. No hurry. Each knot pulled once, slow as tying down a shroud. He lifted his head, eyes unsmiling. "Bring the collar." The third time. Now not an offer. It was the law of that street for that afternoon, the written text of silence. Eli stepped back half a pace to avoid the sheriff's shadow. His hand dropped from the bare air, falling to his side. Nails dug into palm to keep it still. He leaned, giving the girl some shelter from the wind. The gust skated the dust on the street, revealing layers of dried boot prints. One was fresher, the toe pointing toward the nail. It stopped short of the wall, chose to stop. No one would admit it. On the saloon roof, 2 tin sheets rasped together, the long whine like rope slowly tightening around a wrist. A mother pulled her child away from the sound. The child cried without voice, mouth open. Its tears fell onto a white dust smear on the sill, tasting rust, though it touched no metal. A standing gap between him and the ring, him and the girl, him and all the eyes pretending not to watch. That gap was the choke of the afternoon. It didn't break. It just stayed, making people swallow the words that would spill blood if spoken. The pawnbroker hitched his pouch, stood, ready to step inside. But before he turned, the ink-stained little finger drew a quick line on the tabletop, then dotted its end. A mark. He looked at no one, went in. The tapping stopped. The ring still hung. No wind. People began to breathe again, one by one, like those who'd passed through a narrow cut in the rock, without knowing someone might be waiting at the other end. Sheriff Vaughn looked at Eli, said nothing. But one truth was out, enough for everyone to hear, though none would claim it. To take her from the rope, you brought back the ring. On the street, dust rose again. On the lamppost, the water jug stayed, the surface flat. But in people's eyes, a new film had formed, thin as silver ash. And at the far end of town, in the dark alley where the chalk X was still soft, someone's boots had turned toward the forge. The silver ring touched Eli's hand before he could think, cold to numbness, like gripping a gun barrel in snow, skin drawing tight, spine rising. Rust at the nail's tip broke to crumbs, scattering sharp on the ground. The thin band, thought to be light, weighed heavy once off the nail, like something carrying memory. His fingers closed by reflex. Pulse thumped in his wrist, visible. The crowd shifted inward. A chair leg scraped the saloon floor, then stopped. Someone cleared their throat. The sound fell into the street like a stone into a dry well. Shadows edged forward half a step, enough to close the ring, enough for those inside to hear the breath of those out. The forge shop's curtain moved slightly, the dark slit behind it like a half-lidded eye. Sheriff Vaughn laid his hand on his gun grip. Dry skin, green veins, fresh sweat trace. His thumb slid along the holster mouth, like a man checking reins before a river crossing. The pipe was gone from his hand, his eye halfway from pain. The dried blood under the hemp cracked into small teeth. Wind slid past, the rope on skin making a sound like thin metal. The water jug's lid still open, surface smooth, showing nothing but a slice of sky. Put it down. Not spoken full, just two sounds breaking from her throat, dying in her mouth. Eli heard because he was near. He lowered the ring half a knuckle. Didn't drop. Didn't hand over. Didn't throw. His middle finger found the chip, pain pricking like a knife edge. Across the street, the stranger shifted a shoulder. The long case angled lower by half an inch. The metal hook scraped the strap, giving a small spark. He stilled. The left heel cut a new line over the old in the dirt. The brim stayed low. Only the thin scar on his cheek caught and lost the light. Eli drew a breath. Leather smell, damp straw, cold metal. Each pulled a thread of memory, campfire, an upper arm bearing the mark of a ring, the back of a shirt soaked under a tin roof in the rains, running feet in a dark alley. He clenched the ring. Blood pushed into his knuckle joints, skin pale. The girl shook her head, not wide, just enough for the sweat-tacked hair to slip from her collarbone. Her eyes left the ring for a single beat, touched Eli's. Deep black, no plea, no anger. Only the one truth she carried tied to that post. Whoever wears it, dies in their hands. The words fell, and no one caught them. No one objected. No one smiled. The saloon, once full of the scrape of glass on wood, went still as held breath. A spoon hit the floor, a single ding stretching before it vanished. On the roof, the two tin sheets stopped rasping. The wind paused. The water in the jug sat still, like glass draped in cloth. In their hands. She didn't say who, didn't need to. A few eyes dropped to boot tips. An old man stared at his own hands as if they were suddenly strange. The saloon keeper kept wiping the same clean edge of glass. On the wooden wall, the chalk X had blurred where a wet finger had passed, but the dry pull of short steel against cloth. The stranger didn't circle. He came out as if poured from shadow. 3 close steps, silent as a bull's hooves on damp ground. Anyone near could see his hand cool, pulse steady. The dagger flashed once under the sun, then vanished into the narrow dark between rope and skin. The rope parted without a snap. It gave, then thrummed low like an old string dropping from a peg. Stray fibers sprayed and stuck to the sweat on her wrist. The wind returned, but not enough to lift them away. The stranger stepped back half a pace, knife lowered, the other hand open as if ready to catch someone falling. He caught no one. Sheriff Vaughn drew his gun, fast. The black muzzle slid from the holster like a snake's tongue. Leather hissed thin. The barrel cut a straight line toward where the knife had been, but the knife was gone. That line stopped in the space between two bodies. Vaughn held still. Only his breathing changed, heavier by a shade. His eyes didn't ask why. They measured distance to objects. The girl didn't run, didn't step back, didn't reach for the fallen rope. She brought her hands forward, wrists ringed with purple, lifted to chest height. Her face stayed toward the ring in Eli's hand. Her eyes no longer drifted with the silver light. They fixed, like someone staring into a cold mirror, knowing she would vanish if she looked long enough. Eli didn't have time to ask. She had already stepped half a pace. Her fingers touched the ring's chipped edge, direct to where the old fire smell lived. Her skin jolted once, as if plunged into snowmelt. She pulled the ring from his hand. So clean a motion no one could say who had given it. No asking, no weighing, no need. No. The word left Eli's throat one breath too late. No one heard it whole. The wind broke it in the middle. His hand followed but didn't touch, only caught the air still cold from where the ring had passed. Even air had a temperature when something had just cut through it. She raised the ring to her neck. The silver path traced cheek, chin, throat, collarbone. Each point left a prickle like ice rubbed on skin. She lifted her gray, like old ink showing through thin paper. The crowd stepped back. Uneven steps, making a scattered drum of boot heels like light rain on tin. A chair fell. A glass rolled from the counter, didn't break, just spun round, the sound a hollow circle going away. The saloon keeper dropped her rag, hand to chest. The old man on the porch stopped to cough halfway, eyes wide, hand still at his throat. The stranger was gone into shadow, but the smell of leather case and gun oil hung behind. A black thread, twin to the one in the nail hole, clung to the hook on his coat where he'd passed. On the ground lay the cut rope fiber, curled at the end like a burnt feather. Eli looked at her neck. The silver ring sat there like a sentence already written. Her throat no longer trembled. Her heart struck beneath the skin, and where it met the silver, a faint echo bounced back. She looked straight at Vaughn, didn't speak, didn't smile, but at the corner of her eyes something had changed. The shattered look of the bound was gone. In its place, the look of someone drawing the hunter closer, on her terms. Sheriff Vaughn lifted his gun a fraction, then lowered it. He pushed the pipe deeper into his pocket, as if to free his hand. The muzzle stayed black, steady, but at his throat one tendon rose, then sank. He looked around. The crowd had shifted back, leaving a hollow in the ring. No one stood in it now. The hollow looked like a dry pit where something had once been buried, then forgotten. Eli opened his mouth, then shut it. He wanted to ask why, but inside why was a room with a wooden door and no hinges. Open it, and it would never close. He understood that in his bones. He looked at his hands. They had kept the ring from falling. They had placed the cold air on her neck by being a second too slow. That second was enough. She touched the chip with her fingertip. Once, like someone touching an old scar to remind themselves the new skin had not grown thick enough. She didn't cry, didn't shake. She turned her head so the silver rim met the light. The light slid like a thin blade across her cheek, then was gone. She spoke, this time loud enough for those at the edge of the ring to hear. "They'll come faster." Her "they" was not the watchers. When he swallowed. Not a word, just clearing the way for air. He stepped half a pace to the side, enough that if a bullet came straight, it would take his shoulder first. No one told him to. No one stopped him. No one clapped. Everything stayed in its place. In that silence, the silver ring at her neck, motionless, became the largest object of the afternoon. It told nothing, but everyone heard it. And at the far end of the street, where the dust was rising, someone was riding in. At the same steady pace as always. Not fast, not slow, just on time, as they always came, when the ring was in its place on someone's neck. Sheriff Vaughn yanked the gun from its holster, the black muzzle flashing brief as an animal's claw. No shout, only a heavy breath. The stranger had already vanished into the back alley, as if swallowed by earth. What remained was the damp leather scent of his gun case, and the cut rope fiber curled on the ground. its end kinked like a burnt feather. The girl stood straight, both wrists red-grooved, the silver ring on her neck like a finished engraving. Her eyes didn't follow the muzzle. They fixed on Eli. Her chin dipped just enough to keep her voice from breaking. "Now they'll hunt me until I'm dead." Eli shifted, half his body shielding her from the firing line. No calculation. One hand resting loose on the saddle skirt. In his palm, a thin black streak had bloomed since touching the thread inside the nail hole. It traced along his lifeline, fine as soaked ink. The sheriff's eyes brushed over it without changing. He stepped back half a pace, lowered the gun a finger's width, like a man easing breath after pressing too hard. No one took it as leave, but the air between them widened. Eli led the horse out of the emptied space in the street. The reins clicked against the iron ring. He slid the water jug into her hand. "Head toward the river." His voice low, rasped like stone. She took the reins, one small foot on the stirrup, then stopped midway. Her nose wrinkled, as if catching a known scent. She didn't mount. The horse's flanks steamed, waiting for a command. Nor lowered a hand. The road lay open. People stepped aside, eyes on their boots, as if noticing mud for the first time. The horse climbed the red dirt rise, white foam at its bit. Dust stung Eli's arms in the wind. The silver ring brushed the saddle horn once, its sheen turned amber by grit. He unfastened the leather loop, hung the ring on the horn like a bad charm. The chipped edge touched the horse's hide. The animal twitched its shoulder, hair shivering to shake it off. Her hand pressed the saddle guard, steady. "Leave it." Her tone not asking. They cut along the path behind the grain store, brush closing their outlines. Eli didn't look back, but he heard hoofbeats echoing from far off. On the ridge behind, dark shapes of riders crossed the sky. The black dots grew. Metal flashed once on a gun barrel, then was gone. No shouts, only the steady pace, like any other afternoon, when the work was the work, not a crime. Eli eased the horse toward a line of shadow. She glanced quickly. Not the river now. That's where they block first. He didn't ask. Turned the horse into the edge of a fallow field. Dry grass scraped his boots. The smell of damp straw caught in his throat. Once clean in the rains, now sour. A hawk cut overhead, its shadow splitting into two strips on the ground, before it vanished behind the roof of an old shed. The shed rose at the lip of a mound, low roof, timber walls cracked like an old man's skin. The front door barred with a rotted bamboo pole. On one wall, a small locked hatch, the flat-bodied, square-cornered padlock, same as in the pawnbroker's pouch. The keyhole smeared with fresh grease, black shine, opened not long ago. Eli wasn't worried about noise. He pressed a boot toe under the bamboo pole and lifted. It broke with a dry snap, splinters falling like grain. Inside smelled of old dust, mice, and damp cloth. Light slanted in narrow beams, striping the air with backlit motes. In the far left corner, under a three-legged table, sat a stack of wooden chests, lids ajar. No names, only a shallow carving on each lid. 3 short lines cracked, strap broken. Eli didn't open it, but its edges were thick with charcoal dust, the corner pressed with dozens of tiny fingertip marks, as if held by hands still wet with soil. Some pages torn, some stamped with a skewed blue seal. He lifted one corner, didn't have time to read. She pressed it back down, shook her head. No more words needed. The objects on the floor said enough. Wind slid through holes in the tin roof, dropping dust in short ribbons. Outside, the ring on the saddle horn trembled once, greeting its sisters in the chests, calling someone to count. Eli felt his heartbeat hollow out for a beat, then flood back, heavier. "Don't touch more," she said, eyes fixed on the cloth rolls. "Anything out of place, they'll know." Eli swallowed hard, bitter with lamp oil. He bent, picked up the piece of cut hemp rope from the street, set it on a chest lid. Set, not tied. The scrap lay still like a dead worm, job finished. She watched him longer than a breath, then pulled a rag from her pocket, scrubbing at the black mark in his palm. It didn't fade. The stain had sunk into his skin. She didn't try again. Eli stepped out the shed's back door. From here, the ridge where horse shapes had shown earlier lay bare. No riders now, but fine dust still hung low, like fresh forge smoke fanned once and left to drift. He listened. Sight was no use. The ear sorted out the waste, leaves, birds, tin creek, and kept 3 beats. Hooves. Far. Stopped. 3 beats again. Stopped again. A disciplined rider. No hurry. No heat. She stood in the doorway, one hand on the saddle, eyes still on the shed's dark. Each one is a person. No examples offered. They all disappeared. Eli pressed his palm to the door beam. The grain bit sharp into skin. He looked at the black stain in his hand again. It hadn't faded. He understood. People gone with the ring. The living meant the ring moved on to another neck. The ring still found its old road without a guide. Whoever touched it was already on the roll. Outside, the hoofbeats had stopped. No fresh summons beat or a check beat. No one knew, only that it didn't stop. She moved around, dropped the saddle knob lower so the ring hung near the horse's belly, hidden under a wet cloth. "Let them see it late," she said. "Pull them a beat behind." Eli didn't ask why the cloth was wet. The tang was like river water mixed with soil. Maybe someone had thought of this earlier, maybe not. Here, forethought and accident were the same. What lay at the throat was still a ring. Outside, a short whistle. Not for men, for horses. A breath snort in reply. Then silence. Shoes set down very light. Many shoes. Even pace. Exact beats. Eli looked round the shed. No good exits. Front door's pole broken. Back door opened onto an open slope. Side hatch locked with rust but fresh grease. Someone had used it. A high vent hole, cat-sized, not man-sized. He pulled her deeper into shadow, near the stack of rotted jute sacks. The mouse stench was sharp as medicine. They stood flat against the wall, breath touching wood. The silver at her throat had cooled, as if aware of eyes on it. He didn't reach. She didn't either. Both stared at the door. On the sill, the leather book stayed shut, dust thick over whatever hand had written there. Paper stayed silent. Wood didn't groan. Only the sound of blood in the neck, clear once the ear had thrown away the rest. And outside, the horses waited so long you could hear sweat drip to the ground. No greeting, no name called, no charge spoken. Only the weight of presence, like rock on rotten tin. She tilted her head just enough for the ring to touch her chin. Silver almost rang, then didn't. Eli looked at the narrow dark between 2 boards where a small spider stood still, 4 legs on its thread, counting. The hoofbeats outside had gone still. Inside, each held a thing. One held a knife, one held a throat. The ring hung on the saddle, silver dulled by dust, no shine now. But those who'd seen it shine still saw it shine, even in dark. And that was when the ones outside chose whether to lift a shoe or lower a gun. No stood ajar. Coke dust drifted in the sunbeam, grains fine as salt. The apprentice poked his head out, eyes making one loop from nail to ring, then slipped back in, yanking the curtain too fast. Dust flashed once. The saloon woman swept her stoop with a wire broom. At the wall edge, she stopped. Bristles near the ring scratched, then drew back like from something alive. She pretended to brush the sill, eyes down. A boy following his mother reached out toward the silver light. She pulled his hand back, harder than needed. No scold, No reason. Both dropped to the street's edge, skirting a puddle, avoiding the ring's shadow like avoiding a doctor's. Sheriff Vaughn stood under the opposite awning, no pipe in hand. From his shirt pocket, the stem showed a short inch. He looked at the ring longer than a breath, didn't step in or out. Wind pressed his trouser cuff to his boot, showing last night's mud. A fresh, thin scratch crossed the holster strap. He turned, looked down the street. No one called. He called no one. The pawnbroker brought a chair to his stoop, vest buttoned with tarnished silver. His little finger still bore the black in its crease. He sat, the leather bag on his lap, unopened. His eyes traveled, never resting more than a beat anywhere. They paused shorter on the ring. He tapped the armrest with a nail. Clack, clack, clack. The saloon woman glanced up at that beat, then down as if she'd erred before some higher witness. The ring's light was strange, silver tinted with dust, the chip still there. But inside, by the catch, was a tiny solder bead, dry drop, black at center, grayed at edge. Yesterday, it hadn't been there, and the fine reversed cuts had gone straight, now matching the pattern on the lock. Someone had handled it. Someone had changed it. An old man on the store step squinted, pulled his hat brim low. He moved his heel, showing a scrap of crumbled blue chalk stuck to the sole, same as the mark on the stable wall last night. He scraped it into dust, spat on it, worked it into the dirt. Met no one's eye. The butt straight at the wall where the nail was set, stopped there, turned heel. The turn was sharp, unfaded. Whoever walked it had known where to stop. A child came close, eyes asking. The grandmother shook her head. The child looked up once more, cheeks puffed, then let the air go. The ring quivered once more, small as a breath. The sun climbed higher. The ring's shadow shortened, grew denser. Beneath it, a scatter of silver dust, as if something had been rubbed into the wall and covered over to hide. At the nail's base, a single black thread end, short as half a hair, driven crosswise into the grain. It led from the nail hole outward. Last night it lay buried. Today it showed its head, like a snake's tongue, like a trace left by a hand, by intent or accident. The saloon woman sat, poured water into a glass scored with a V-shaped scratch. She filled it, slid it toward an empty place on the table. No one came to drink. The glass stood, reflecting the wall's ring as a warped shape, broken at the scratch. Like another ring, split but still hanging. She stared at that warp longer than was normal. She turned the glass. The warp moved, never straightened. The church bell far off rang once, uneven, as if someone had pulled the rope and let go. No second strike came to the street. Wind passed. The ring gave one more sound. Clack. The pawnbroker's shop opened. He wiped his hands on his apron, laying fresh black over old. He looked up at the sky, clouds running in from the river flats. Wind would rise, and someone, standing in the awning's shadow, looked at the tiny solder bead on the clasp, then lifted a hand to their own neck, touching a faint old scar. The hand stopped in midair. No one saw, but the person swallowed. The swallow was heard in the stillness. Beneath the nail, the fine dust lifted in wisps, then dropped in blurred arcs. From the wall's edge, two lines of prints led away, one wide, man's boots, sole worn on one side, one small, shallow heels, uneven stride. The first print stepped onto last night's mud mark, then moved off, edging around a rusted can, curving past the salt barrels, hugging the wall like someone avoiding shadow. On the large sole, a dark streak formed, long as a skewed line. It showed clear when the two sets stepped into sunlight, like a drawn mark. Along the vet's fence, weeds to the ankle. Both lines ran its edge. Once, the small set leapt onto the bank to avoid a mud patch, then dropped back down. On the bank, a black hair clung to a thorn, long, fine. Wind pulled it to quiver like fishing line. A sparrow landed on the fence, tilted its head at the hair like at an insect, then flew. At the turn to the river road, the lines split. The large went down the slick bank. The small hugged the old barrels, rejoined later. In one spot, the small marks vanished, replaced by a side scrape like a slip. The large mark stood deep right there. Then both moved on, closer together. No wind reached that place. The air held damp straw smell, the smell of night. Past the stable wall where last night's blue chalk X had been, today it was whitewashed. Quick work. The lime still wet, running in lines like tears. The brush strokes were coarse. The hand had left uneven whorls. At the wall's base, the two sets of prints crossed the fallen lime, carrying away two small white spots in the mud. 10 steps on, the spots were gone. At the rise by the open field, a new mark joined in. A small round horseshoe print, dark and deep. 1, 2, 3. Then nothing. A horse had come, stood, turned back. No chase, no closing in, just watching the two lines go. The wind there was strong. Dust bit into the eyes of any watching. When they opened again, the two people's tracks were half gone. Higher up, the sun slanted, showing fine marks on the road like hair standing in wind. The wind shifted, blowing from the river back toward town, pushing fine grit into the track grooves, swelling them like the lips of a cut about to close. The small marks blurred first, the large after. On soft earth, they vanished as if no one had walked there. An old man bent to pick up a wooden button at the roadside. Last night it had been in the saloon's awning. He turned it in his fingers, studying the scored lines on its edge. The ash still blew this way, mixed with riverbank wind, with dust, with the smell of cooled silver. The wind rose. The two lines of prints were no longer lines. They became faint notes, drifting apart, then gone. One watcher pulled his hat low, shading his eyes. Another turned away, stepped into an awning. No one followed. No one called a name. The morning's work settled back into its place, except for the nail and the ring on the wall. By noon the sun stood high, shadows short. The ring still hung on the wall. No one asked who had brought it back. The question sat in a few throats, then dropped like a pebble onto dry earth, making no hollow. Some hand had touched it in the night. The proof was quiet. The solder bead at the clasp, the changed cut direction, the black thread head showing from the nail hole, the rubbed silver dust under it, the wet boot prints to the wall and back, the quick lime over old marks. Those told more than any voice. They only lacked a name, and the town no longer liked naming what it did together. The saloon woman swapped the glass, put the V-scratched one in the lower shelf. She wiped the table, avoiding the small dried blood spot from morning. The blood spot's round matched a wooden peg head. The ring reflected on the table as a warped half-moon, still broken at the same place. She folded the cloth, shoved it deep, like a sentence she'd just managed to swallow. The blacksmith's boy hauled out a bundle of coal. Passing, he glanced. He saw the solder bead, stopped. One lump slipped, fell, burst dust. He bent to pick it up. On his fingertip, the 3-line and dot mark showed in specks. He wiped it on his trousers. The black spread larger. He grinned at someone not there, then walked fast. The coal dust trail behind him looked like something crawling in soil. The pawnbroker rose, moved his chair into the awning. He hitched the leather bag, didn't open it. He tilted his hat, casting a shadow exactly half over the nail. The ring dulled. When done, he pulled the shadow away. The ring brightened. He wiped his brow, showing the black in his little finger. He looked at it for a second. Didn't rub, didn't hide. He set the cloth, turned her head, eyes wet but unspilled. By late afternoon, clouds dragged low. Wind from the river carried the smell of live mud. The ring trembled once more. Clack. Somewhere at the street's far end, the sound of nails going into wood. Clack. Then clack again. The forge shut. The saloon lit lamps. On the glass, the ring's reflection softened, lengthened with the flame, half-moon warp becoming a thin blade. No one touched it again. That not touching had a shape, hands drawn back when passing, eyes sliding quickly, fixing elsewhere, feet shifting when its shadow curved toward them, the story changing subject at the exact point it would have been mentioned. People learned fast. The first time was hard, the second time easier. By the third, it became habit, became an unwritten law, like the old man with the yellow beard said yesterday, became something everyone did together without admitting they were doing it. Night fell, crickets eating into the quiet. Below the wall, the 2 rows of morning footprints now gone. The wind had swept them, sand filled them, like a board surface after someone planed away a very thin layer. In the sky, stars scattered thin. Near the tin roof, a very faint streak of smoke, like someone had just blown out a pipe. The ash-silver smell, if there was one, had already mixed into the night. In the dark, someone passed, stopped right under the nail, looked up, no longer than a single breath. They lifted a hand, then lowered it. The ring made no sound. The wind shifted. The yellow dog under the water trough whimpered, low enough for itself alone. It turned its head, curled in, resting its muzzle on its own leg. Eyes closed, ears not. And the next morning, when sunlight again slanted off the tin roof, people would step around, avoiding the silver ring's shadow as they would a doctor's shadow. The black thread in the nail hole would be shorter from the gusts. The solder bead on the clasp would be grayer. No one would ask who had brought the ring back. No one would touch it again. But all who passed would swallow. A grain caught in the throat, not going out in words, not going down there. Hearing the ring strike the nail, would you have walked on as every day, or stopped and dirtied your hands? Justice might come, it might not, but from now on, whenever you hear a very small tock somewhere, you will remember this silver ring, and remember the question, is silence a shield, or a signature on someone else's sentence?